The market on planet Varel was always full of strange colors and strange smells. Humans rarely came here, but Reed, a quiet engineer from Earth, walked through the glowing aisles with curious eyes. He had come to buy mechanical parts for his ship, not knowing that today his life would change forever. Rows of silver shelves lined both sides. Floating labels in alien language hovered above every section. Robotic attendants moved back and forth carrying meat from creatures Reed had never seen before. The air was cold, humming softly with machines. Everything looked normal until he reached the back corner labeled Organic section. Reed slowed down. Something about the place felt wrong. He heard a faint sound, like a sigh or whisper. He turned his head, and his heart nearly stopped beating. Behind a glass display, where frozen slabs of flesh were stacked neatly, stood a woman, not human but not fully alien either. Her skin was pale with a soft silver hue. Her eyes glowed faintly blue, and she stood perfectly still. At first, Reed thought it was a hologram or some new type of advertisement, but then he saw a thin tag hanging from her wrist. It flickered under the white light, and when he leaned closer, his breath caught in his throat. The tag said product code 7843, processed organic, former sentient. His mind went blank. His chest filled with a cold, sick feeling. She was alive. He could see her chest move slightly as she breathed shallowly. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. Her eyes met his for a second, and in that single second, Reed felt something powerful. It was fear, sadness, and a silent scream for help. People around him didn't even notice. Aliens and machines passed by, shopping, laughing, trading. None of them cared. It was like she was invisible. Just another item for sale. Reed stepped closer. Pressing his hand against the glass, she blinked once slowly, as if trying to tell him she could still understand. His thoughts raced. How could someone sell a living being who allowed this? The law of the Galactic Union was clear. Sentient life couldn't be traded. But maybe this planet didn't care. Maybe money was stronger than morality here. Reed's stomach twisted. He wanted to break the glass. But security drones hovered in every corner. Each armed with stun blasters, he forced himself to breathe. He knew one reckless move could get them both killed. He stepped back and acted like he was just browsing. But his mind was already planning. He needed to find out how to buy her. Not because he wanted her, but because it was the only way to set her free. He walked to the nearest counter where an android cashier waited. Its metallic voice was calm and emotionless. "Welcome, valued customer. How may I assist you?" Reed tried to speak naturally. "I'm interested in the product in Section 9. The one labeled 7843. The android blinked twice, processing his request. Product 7843 is classified as high-value organic material. Do you wish to purchase for consumption or research? The words made Reed's skin crawl. For research, he said quickly. Trying to control his voice, the android nodded, tapping a few holographic buttons. Processing transaction. Total cost, 4,000 credits. Reed's hand shook slightly as he transferred the credits from his wrist device. The scanner beeped. Transaction approved. Please proceed to retrieval zone, the android said. Reed thanked it quietly and walked back, his heart beating faster than ever. When he returned, the glass door in front of the display hissed open. A cold mist flowed out, and two small drones lifted the alien woman gently. Her eyes fluttered weakly. She looked at Reed again, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. One of the drones asked for his signature. He placed his hand on the scanner and it spoke. Ownership transferred to human buyer. Those words echoed in his head like poison. He wasn't her owner. He was her rescuer, he whispered softly. You're safe now, I promise. Though he wasn't sure if she could even understand. The drones lowered her onto a platform cart. She was light, fragile, wearing a thin, metallic fabric that looked more like packaging than clothing. Reed covered her with his jacket. People stared for a moment but then looked away as if this was nothing unusual. He pushed the cart through the glowing aisles. Trying to act normal, his mind screamed with every step. What if the scanners detected his intentions? What if someone stopped him? Every beep of his wristband sounded louder. Every camera light seemed to follow him. But somehow he reached the exit outside. The red sky of Varel burned softly over the horizon. Neon lights reflected on wet streets. Reed loaded the alien woman carefully into his small hover transport. She stirred faintly, whispering a sound he couldn't understand. Her voice was delicate like wind through glass. As he sat in the driver's seat, he looked at her once more. She was trembling, tears sliding down her cheek. And then in a weak, broken voice, she whispered a single word. Freedom. Reed felt his throat tighten. That one word told him everything. She was aware, alive, and terrified. He started the engine, the hum of the hovercraft rising. His reflection flickered in the windshield, and for the first time, he realized something deep. He had just broken a law that could cost him his life. But he didn't care because somewhere inside him, humanity still meant something, even in a galaxy that had forgotten what mercy looked like. And as the vehicle lifted off into the red sky, the market lights faded behind him, and the barcode tag on her wrist blinked one last time before going dark. Like a dying star finding peace. The air outside the market was cold and heavy. Rain of red dust fell slowly from the neon sky. Reed sat inside his small hover vehicle, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. The alien woman lay motionless on the seat beside him. Covered in his jacket, her breathing was shallow, her skin pale like silver moonlight. He didn't know her name, her story, or how she ended up in that cruel place. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't leave her there. He checked the rearview mirror. Drones were circling above the market roof, their red eyes flashing as they scanned for suspicious signals. His heart pounded hard against his ribs. Every second felt like it could be his last as a free man. He pressed a small button on his wrist device, and the vehicle's cloaking field shimmered to life, bending light around it, hiding them from scanners for now. They were ghosts in the city. The alien woman made a soft sound. A weak whisper like a breath of wind. Her fingers moved slightly. She tried to speak but couldn't form words. Reed turned to her. "It's okay, you're safe now," he said quietly. But inside he knew they weren't safe at all. The purchase had gone through cleanly. But that also meant the system now had his data, his ID, his location, his payment logs. Any mistake and the authorities would trace it all back to him. Freeing her wasn't just an act of kindness. It was rebellion against an entire galaxy that turned life into property. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small med patch, carefully pressing it on her neck. The patch glowed faint blue and released nano serum into her veins. Stabilizing her breathing, she opened her eyes slowly, confusion written all over her face. She looked at him and whispered something in a language he didn't know, her voice trembling. He shook his head gently. "I don't understand, but you're going to be fine. I promise." Her eyes were full of fear and disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend that someone would help her. Her hands tried to remove the tag from her wrist, but it wouldn't come off. The barcode blinked faintly, sending small pulses of light. "Don't touch it," Reed said quickly. "It's a tracker." She froze, eyes widening. He took out a small tool from his utility belt and began working on the tag. Sparks flew, and after a few tense seconds, the device beeped and went dark. The moment the light faded, her shoulders dropped in relief. She looked at him again, silent tears in her eyes. She whispered one word. "Why?" Reed hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that." He started the engine again, the hover vehicle gliding through narrow metal streets filled with flickering holograms and flashing advertisements. Every building towered above them like cold steel giants. Every screen showing bright smiles that hid darker truths. Reed's mind was racing. He needed to find somewhere safe before anyone noticed she was missing from the market inventory. As he turned into a darker alley, he noticed something strange on his wristband. An alert flashing, unauthorized purchase flagged. Return product immediately. His blood ran cold. They had noticed, and now security drones were already on their way. Reed pressed a few buttons on the control panel, switching off the vehicle's ID signature and activating manual mode. "Hang on," he muttered. The alien woman clutched the seat, eyes wide. The hover car dove into the dense fog between tall buildings. The sound of drone engines grew louder behind them. Bright red beams scanned the air. Searching, Reed took a sharp turn, barely missing a billboard. The vehicle shook, alarms blaring. "Come on, come on," he whispered through clenched teeth. A beam grazed the back wing, sending sparks flying. The alien woman gasped softly but didn't scream. She just watched him with a strange calmness, as if she had already accepted fate before. Finally, Reed spotted an abandoned tunnel entrance. Half buried under debris, he turned sharply and dove inside. The car scraped against the metal edge but made it through. The tunnel was dark and silent except for the hum of their engine. He parked inside and shut off the lights. Everything went black except for the dim glow from the control screen. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of their breaths filled the silence. Reed leaned back, his body trembling from adrenaline. "We're safe for now," he said softly. "But they'll keep looking." She nodded weakly. Still clutching his jacket, minutes passed before she finally spoke again. Her voice weak but clearer now. You bought me, she said, as if trying to understand the impossible. Reed looked at her and replied gently, I bought your freedom. She blinked, staring at him like she was trying to see if he was real, then whispered, Humans never do that. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe not all humans, he said, but some of us still try, outside the tunnel. Faint red lights passed by, drones scanning the area, searching for the missing product, but inside, under the quiet hum of the city, something new had started, not just a rescue, but the spark of rebellion. Reed leaned against the seat, closing his eyes for a moment, thinking about what he had just done. This wasn't just saving one life. This was breaking a system that had forgotten compassion. The alien woman sat quietly beside him, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Her eyes filled with a light that hadn't been there before, as the city roared above them. 2 lives changed direction that night, one human who defied the laws of the galaxy, and one alien who had finally been seen not as property, but as a person. And as the hovercraft sat hidden in the shadows, the barcode tag on the floor blinked one last faint light, before going completely dark, disappearing into silence. A small piece of proof that humanity still had a heartbeat, even in a world that had turned cold. The tunnel was dark and silent. Only the soft hum of the hovercar filled the space. Reed's hands were still trembling as he stared at the faint glow from the dashboard. The alien woman sat beside him, her breathing steady but her eyes full of questions outside. The world above was alive with searchlights and mechanical drones hunting for what they called a missing product. But to Reed, she wasn't a product, she was a person, and he was not about to let the galaxy take her back. He leaned forward and tapped a few buttons on the control panel. The holographic map flickered to life, showing red zones spreading across the city. Every route leading out of the area was blocked by patrol drones, checkpoints, and scanners. The words "Containment Protocol Active" flashed on the screen. He muttered under his breath. They've locked down the whole district. The alien woman turned to him, her voice soft. You should let me go, they will catch you. Reed looked at her and shook his head. I didn't come this far to lose you now, she blinked, her glowing blue eyes reflecting the light from the control screen. But you don't even know me, she whispered. Why risk your life for me? Reed paused, staring at her for a long second. Because someone has to, he said simply. And maybe I'm just tired of watching everyone do nothing. The woman lowered her gaze, her hands trembling as she held the jacket he had given her. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Reed opened a compartment near his seat and pulled out a small device, a thin metallic disc glowing faint green. This is a scrambler, he said. It'll block our heat and signal signature for a few minutes, but once it dies, they'll find us again. He pressed the disc against the car wall, and the sound around them faded like someone turned off the universe. The world became still. He started the vehicle again, this time flying low under the old highways, moving through forgotten industrial zones filled with rusted ships and broken machines. The city above them glittered like a storm of stars, unaware of what was happening below. After a few minutes, the alien woman spoke again, her voice quiet but clearer now. My name was Lyra, she said slowly. At least I think it was. Before they took everything from me. Reed glanced at her. Lyra, he repeated softly. The name felt right, gentle but strong. Who did this to you, he asked. She closed her eyes. The Trade Authority, she whispered. They captured my people when we refused to sell the oceans of our world. They erased our names, our history. They made us property. Reed gripped the wheel tighter, anger building inside him. That's not trade, he said quietly. That's slavery. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. On most worlds, they call it efficiency, she said. The scrambler started to blink red, its power fading. Reed cursed under his breath. We're out of time. He turned the vehicle sharply, heading toward the lower city, a maze of shadows and old tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the surface. If there was any place to hide, it was there. But just as they entered the underpass, a siren echoed through the night. A security drone had spotted their taillight. Within seconds, beams of red light cut through the mist. They found us, Reed shouted. The car jolted as energy shots hit the rear wing. Alarms blared. Lyra gasped as the cabin filled with flashing red light. Hold on, Reed said, gripping the controls. The hovercar shot forward, weaving between concrete pillars and shattered pipes. The walls glowed from the reflection of energy fire. Drones swarmed behind them, metal wings slicing through the air. Reed took a sharp dive down an unfinished shaft, the vehicle scraping against steel edges, sparks flying. He pressed a button on the dashboard, releasing a cloud of metallic chaff that scattered like glitter. The drone's sensors glitched for a moment. Losing lock, now, he muttered, slamming the throttle. The car plunged deeper underground until everything outside turned pitch black. They came to a stop in a narrow service tunnel. The lights flickered and then went out completely. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of their heavy breathing. Reed leaned back, sweat dripping down his face. "We lost them," he whispered. Lyra looked around, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Where are we?" she asked. "An old maintenance route," he replied. "No scanners reach this deep." He stepped out of the car, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. "Stay here," he said, scanning the corridor ahead with a small flashlight. Lyra followed quietly despite his warning, her bare feet making no sound. She looked around the tunnel walls covered in faded warning signs written in languages long forgotten. As they walked, Reed noticed something. Symbols carved into the wall, small triangles and circles glowing faintly blue. "This isn't maintenance," he whispered. "This is old tech." Lyra placed her hand on the wall, her eyes widening. "No," she said softly. "This is ours. My people built these before the trade came." Reed turned to her. "Then this is where we hide," he said. She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the glowing lines as if touching a memory she had lost. Suddenly, a sound echoed from behind. A faint hum growing louder, Reed turned sharply, his hand reaching for his sidearm. But it was only a small maintenance drone, half-broken, rolling weakly along the floor. Lyra knelt beside it, her fingers moving quickly. "I can use this," she said, opening its panel and connecting wires. After a moment, a small hologram flickered, an old city map. She pointed to a deep zone far below. "Here," she said. "This leads to the old council archives if we can reach it. I can prove what they did to us." Reed nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "Then we go there," he said as they continued walking. The faint sound of the city faded completely, replaced by the distant heartbeat of old machines sleeping beneath the earth. And for the first time since she was captured, Lyra allowed herself to hope above them. The Trade Authority issued a galactic alert, declaring a human criminal and a stolen asset on the run. But in the darkness below, two fugitives walked side by side, one driven by compassion, the other by the dream of freedom. And though they didn't know it yet, their escape was not just survival. It was the beginning of a revolution, one that would shake the stars themselves. The tunnel grew warmer the deeper they went. Faint lights pulsed along the walls like veins carrying energy through the metal earth. Reed walked ahead with his flashlight in one hand, his other resting on his sidearm just in case. Lyra followed quietly, her bare feet gliding over the dusty floor, her eyes glowing faintly blue in the darkness. She looked weaker with every step but also more determined, like someone chasing a forgotten dream. They had been walking for hours through what looked like a maze of abandoned structures, but Lyra seemed to know the way. Her hand brushed over the ancient walls as if she could still feel memories hidden within them. "This place," she whispered softly. "It was once part of the old archive chambers. Before they burned them." Reed turned to her. "You mean your people built this?" She nodded slowly. "Long before humans ever came to this part of the galaxy." Reed stopped for a moment, looking at her, her face pale in the dim light. "Lyra, what exactly happened to your world?" he asked. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but steady. "My world was called Nerith," she said. "We were known for our translators and peacekeepers. We believed in understanding, not war. The Trade Authority came offering alliances, but what they wanted was our water, our crystal oceans that powered their ships. When we refused, they labeled us uncooperative, and soon their fleets came. They destroyed our satellites. They shut down our networks, and then they erased our names from every database." She looked at the floor, her voice breaking slightly. "Those they captured were marked as non-sentient organics, to make it legal to sell us." Reed felt his chest tighten. "That's genocide," he whispered. She nodded faintly. "But hidden under paperwork, no one calls it that anymore." They reached a large metal door covered in dust and glowing faint blue symbols. Lyra touched the center, whispering words in her language. The symbols came to life, spinning slowly. The door hissed and opened. Inside was a wide chamber filled with broken glass panels, old consoles, and faint beams of light that shimmered like ghosts. "This was the archive of voices," Lyra said. Stepping inside, every council decision, every treaty, every speech recorded here. She looked around sadly. Until they wiped it all. Reed followed her, scanning the room with his flashlight. Maybe not everything, he said. Kneeling beside a shattered console. These systems still have power. Lyra rushed to another terminal, her hands moving quickly over the cracked interface. Alien text scrolled across the screen. It's here, she whispered. Fragments of our diplomatic logs, our signatures. Proof that we were recognized as sentient by the Galactic Council. She turned to Reed, her eyes wide with hope. If we can extract this, we can expose them, Reed smiled faintly. Then let's do it, he said, handing her a power cell from his toolkit. Together they rerouted energy into the old system. Sparks flickered as the lights brightened, illuminating symbols and old council emblems carved into the walls. The hum of the machines returned like the heartbeat of a forgotten civilization. Suddenly a voice echoed faintly through the chamber. A woman's voice recorded long ago. Speaking in Lyra's language, Lyra froze, tears welling up in her eyes. That's the voice of the Elder, she whispered. She was our leader before the trade came. Reed listened quietly, though he couldn't understand the words. The tone of the message was enough. It carried sorrow, warning, and love. Lyra's hands trembled as she transferred the recovered files into Reed's wrist device. These records, she said softly, they prove everything. But we need to upload them to the galactic net, and for that, we'll need access to the old relay station above the city. Reed frowned. That place will be crawling with drones. She looked at him. Do you have a better chance? He shook his head. No. But we'll figure it out. As they prepared to leave, a soft metallic sound echoed from the shadows. Reed froze, pulling out his blaster. We're not alone, he said quietly from the darkness. Small red lights appeared, surveillance drones. 3 of them scanning the room. Lyra gasped. They found us, the drones spoke in a flat mechanical voice. Unauthorized biological unit detected. Human accomplice identified. Surrender immediately. Reed fired first, his blaster hitting one drone straight through the eye. It exploded in sparks. Lyra ducked behind a pillar as the others fired back, beams slicing through the air. Reed rolled behind a console, firing again. Another drone crashed into the wall, smoke filling the air. But the 3rd drone activated a distress beacon before he could destroy it. A red signal pulsed through the chamber ceiling. They've sent our location, Reed shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand. We need to move now. They ran through the corridor, the ground shaking as distant engines roared from above. They're deploying interceptors, Lyra said. Her voice trembling, Reed didn't answer. He just kept pulling her forward, through broken halls and narrow tunnels until they reached a lift shaft that led upward. Reed looked up. The shaft stretched high, a thin ladder leading to a small hatch glowing faintly blue. This leads to the old rail lines, Lyra said. From there we can reach the relay station. He nodded. Then climb, he said, placing her hand on the first rung. She hesitated. Reed, if they catch us, they'll kill you for helping me. He smiled slightly. Then I'll die for something that finally matters. They climbed together, the light below fading as engines thundered through the tunnels. At the top, Lyra opened the hatch. The wind rushed in, cold and sharp. The city stretched ahead, glowing like a sea of fire and neon. Reed climbed up after her. Standing on the platform overlooking the endless skyline, drones zipped across the horizon. Alarms echoed faintly, and above it all, the sky shimmered with stars. He looked at her. If we can reach that tower, he pointed to the far beacon rising from the city center. We can send your truth to everyone, Lyra nodded, determination burning in her glowing eyes. Then we have to move before dawn, she said. And for the first time, her voice carried strength instead of fear. As they disappeared into the labyrinth of lights and shadows, far below in the archive chamber, the last surviving console flickered one final message, the voice of the Elder whispering through static, If any of us survive, remember who we were. And Reed, though he couldn't understand the words, felt the weight of them echoing in his chest, because sometimes the truth wasn't just a weapon. It was the only thing that could set an entire galaxy free. The night above the city was alive with chaos. Red lights flashed across the skyline like angry stars. Alarms echoed through the metal canyons, and every drone in the Trade Authority fleet was searching for them. Reed and Lyra moved through the shadows of the lower platforms, their footsteps silent on the wet steel ground. The air smelled of smoke and electric rain. The city was awake, hunting. Reed kept his hood low, his wristband blinking faintly as he scanned the alleys for patrol routes. "They're blocking every exit," he muttered. "We'll have to cut through the transit tunnels." Lyra followed close behind, her glowing eyes hidden under the dark cloak he had given her. She didn't speak, but every sound around them made her flinch, the weight of fear pressing down on both of them. Above, enormous holographic signs flickered with breaking news. "Human trafficker and stolen asset on the run, armed and dangerous." The image showed Reed's face beside a blurred silhouette of Lyra. He stopped for a second, staring at it, a bitter laugh escaping his throat. "They made me the villain," he said quietly. Lyra looked up at the display, her voice soft. "That's how they control the truth." They ducked into an old service corridor, walls covered with rust and old graffiti. The hum of drones echoed behind them, getting closer. Reed pushed open a door and motioned for her to enter. "Quick," he whispered. Inside was a dark stairwell leading down, dim blue lights flickering along the steps. They descended fast, their breaths loud in the silence. At the bottom, they entered a wide tunnel filled with abandoned rail cars, the air thick with dust. Reed moved carefully between the old machines, scanning for movement. Lyra stopped suddenly, her hand on his arm. "Someone's here," she whispered. Reed froze, listening, then heard it too, a faint metallic click followed by footsteps. From behind a wrecked cargo train stepped a group of 3 figures wearing old resistance uniforms, their faces covered with masks. One of them raised a weapon. "Drop the blaster." "Human," he ordered. Reed didn't move. "We're not your enemies," he said calmly. "We're running from the trade." The leader hesitated, lowering his gun slightly. "Everyone's running from the trade," he replied. "What makes you different?" Lyra stepped forward, pulling down her hood, her silver skin shimmering faintly under the dim light. The soldiers gasped. One of them whispered, "She's one of them." Reed nodded. "She's not a slave. She's proof of what they've done." The leader looked at Lyra carefully, then spoke softly. "You shouldn't be alive. They said your kind was wiped out." Lyra met his gaze. "They lied," she said firmly. The man lowered his weapon fully. "Then maybe it's time someone told the truth." He motioned for them to follow, leading them deeper into the tunnels, past old signs and broken screens until they reached a hidden chamber lit by faint yellow lights. A small group of rebels sat around an old projector table, repairing weapons and monitoring signals. The leader introduced himself as Terran, a former trade pilot who deserted after seeing what they did to prisoners. Reed explained their plan, to reach the relay tower and upload Lyra's recovered data. Terran shook his head. "That tower is suicide," he said. "It's surrounded by security, aerial patrols, and a full squad of hunters." Reed looked at him. "If we don't try, the truth dies with us," Terran sighed, rubbing his temples. "Then you'll need help." Before he could finish, an alarm blared across the chamber, a sharp red light flashing on the wall. One of the rebels shouted, "They've found the tunnel entrance." Terran's eyes widened. "They tracked your ship signature, damn it." Reed grabbed Lyra's hand. "We have to move now." The ground shook as explosions echoed above them, metal dust falling from the ceiling. Drones broke through the tunnel walls like angry hornets. Firing energy blasts, the rebels fought back, the narrow space filled with flashing light and the sound of metal and fire. Reed fired at one drone, its engine bursting into flames. Lyra ducked behind a console, covering her ears as the blasts grew louder. Terran tossed Reed a pulse grenade. "Go," he shouted. "We'll hold them off." "Take the side tunnel to the upper lifts." Reed hesitated. "You'll be killed." Terran grinned. "We already were the day we chose to fight." Then he turned and charged toward the advancing drones. Reed pulled Lyra through the narrow tunnel, the walls shaking as explosions followed them. Sparks rained down. Smoke filled the air. They coughed as they ran. "Keep going," he said, her voice trembling. "They're dying because of me." He shook his head. "They're dying because of what's right." They reached the end of the tunnel and burst into a lift chamber, an old industrial elevator with shattered glass panels. Reed slammed the control lever. The lift screeched upward, metal grinding against rust. Below them, the tunnel glowed red from fire, drones swarming like angry bees. "Faster," Reed whispered. Looking up as the lights flickered, the elevator burst out into the upper level of the city, bright neon lights flooding in, the contrast blinding after the darkness. They stepped out onto a wide platform overlooking the city's central district. In the distance, the relay tower rose like a silver spear cutting through the clouds. Its beacon pulsing slowly, Lyra stared at it, her eyes shining. "That's where it all ends," she said softly. Reed nodded. "Or begins," he replied. Suddenly a sound ripped through the air, a high-pitched whine. A shadow passed over them, and a massive pursuit drone descended, engines roaring, red eyes glowing like fire, loudspeakers blaring. "Surrender the asset, human, or be terminated." Reed pulled his blaster. Stepping in front of Lyra, "No chance," he muttered. Shots exploded around them. He fired back, hitting one of the drone's sensors, sparks flying. Lyra grabbed a loose cable and connected it to the relay terminal beside them. Channeling power. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Buying us time," she said, her hands glowing as the current flowed through her skin. Disabling the drone's sensors for a moment, Reed aimed again and fired one last shot, hitting the core. The drone exploded in a flash of blue light, the shockwave knocking them both backward. They hit the ground hard, smoke rising around them. The sirens blaring from nearby towers. Reed groaned, trying to stand. Lyra reached out to help him, her voice weak. "They'll keep coming," he nodded, breathing heavily. "Then we keep running." They turned toward the glowing tower in the distance, its light cutting through the smog like a promise. And even as alarms roared across the city, they began to move again. Two fugitives running not just from death, but toward the only hope left for truth. And as they disappeared into the storm of light and fire, a whisper echoed through the night, one that would soon be heard across every world. The human didn't buy her to own her. He bought her to set her free. The city was burning in the distance, smoke and light twisting together like a storm made of fire. Alarms echoed through the metal canyons and red search beams swept the skies. Reed and Lyra ran across the high bridges of the upper sector, the wind tearing at their faces, every step shaking under the rumble of engines from patrol crafts flying overhead. The relay tower stood ahead of them, tall and bright, reaching into the clouds like a silver blade. Reed's lungs ached. His clothes were torn and covered in ash. Lyra stumbled beside him, weak but determined, her eyes still glowing faintly through exhaustion. "Just a little farther," Reed said between breaths. "We reach the tower and it's over," she nodded silently, though deep down both of them knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Behind them, the hum of drones grew louder, the red glow of their scanners painting the night. Reed turned sharply and fired his blaster. The shot hit one drone square in the chest, sending it spiraling into the river below, but more replaced it faster and heavier. "They're adapting," Lyra said, her voice trembling. Reed gritted his teeth. "Then so will we." They slipped into a maintenance hatch near the tower's base. The metal door creaked shut behind them, sealing them inside the narrow tunnel that led upward. The walls were old, dripping with condensation. Wires ran along every surface. Pulsing with faint blue light, Reed adjusted his wristband, checking the time left before the tracking grid found them again. 5 minutes, he muttered. "That's all we've got." Lyra leaned against the wall, clutching her wrist, the spot where the tracker had once been still raw and bruised. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. "You could still run. They're not after you." "They're after me." Reed looked at her, his expression calm but fierce. "If I leave, then everything we've done means nothing." She stared at him quietly, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "You risked everything for a stranger," she whispered. He shook his head. "You're not a stranger anymore." They climbed higher until they reached a circular chamber filled with old equipment and humming data cores. The air buzzed with static. A huge terminal stood at the center, glowing faintly with the symbol of the galactic network. Lyra stepped forward, her hands trembling. "This is it," she said. "Once I connect my neural code to this system, the truth will spread across every planet in the network." Reed nodded. "Then do it. I'll keep them off you." Lyra hesitated. "It's not that simple," she said quietly. "The upload will overload the system. Someone will have to stay here to stabilize the power relay manually." Reed frowned. "How long would that take?" She looked away. "Long enough that the one who stays won't make it out." Silence filled the room. Only the hum of machines echoed. Reed understood instantly. "You mean one of us has to die?" She nodded slowly. "The upload won't work otherwise." For a moment neither spoke. The weight of the moment pressed heavy in the air. Finally Reed took a deep breath. "Then it's me," he said firmly. Lyra's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. "You've already done enough." Reed shook his head. "You're the proof, Lyra. You're the message the galaxy needs to see if you die. They'll bury the truth again." She stepped closer, her hands trembling. "And if you die," she asked, "who will remember you?" He smiled faintly. "You will." Tears filled her eyes as she realized he meant it. She wanted to argue, but there was no time. Outside, the roar of engines drew closer, the sound of explosions shaking the tower. "They're coming," Reed said. "Start the upload." Lyra wiped her tears and moved to the terminal, connecting the small crystal drive they had carried from the archives. Light flooded the chamber, holographic symbols spinning around her as she began to merge her neural code with the system. Her voice echoed softly as she recited the activation words in her language. Reed ran to the power relay at the far end of the room, adjusting the energy regulators. Sparks flying as he forced the circuits open. Alarms blared. "System overload," the AI voice repeated. "Manual stabilization required." Reed grabbed the cables, connecting them by hand. Electricity surged through him. Pain shot through his body, but he didn't let go. Lyra turned and screamed, "Reed, stop. You'll die." He gritted his teeth. "Just upload it," he shouted. His voice cracking through the noise, she tried to reach him. But the light around the terminal grew blinding. The upload was almost complete. Screens across the galaxy began to flicker, old footage and hidden files bursting into the network. Images of her people being taken, her planet burning, contracts signed by the Trade Authority, evidence they had erased for decades. Reed's arms shook violently, his vision blurred. The room filled with the smell of ozone and burning circuits. Lyra cried out, "Reed, please, you don't have to." But before she could finish, the entire tower shook from an explosion outside. Pieces of ceiling fell. Fire spread along the walls. Reed looked at her one last time and smiled weakly. "Now they'll know," he whispered. The upload reached 100%. The terminal flashed white. A shockwave of light burst outward through the glass walls, spreading across the night sky like dawn breaking over darkness. Every drone in the air froze, their systems overloaded by the sudden surge of data. The truth had been set free. Lyra fell to the floor as the light faded. Coughing through the smoke, she crawled toward Reed, who lay against the relay, his skin scorched, the cable still sparking around him. "Reed," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He opened his eyes slowly, his voice faint. "You did it," she nodded through tears. "No, we did it." He smiled softly, his breathing shallow. "Then it was worth it." His eyes drifted toward the shattered window, where the first rays of morning light began to pierce the smoky sky. "Look," he whispered. "They can't hide it anymore." His hand fell limp against the floor, the faint glow from his wristband flickering out. Lyra clutched his hand tightly, her tears falling onto his skin. "You bought me to set me free," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But you gave more than freedom. You gave hope." She pressed her forehead against his, whispering softly in her language, a word that meant thank you, goodbye, and love all at once. As the tower continued to burn, she stood, her silhouette outlined by the rising sun. The network screens across the galaxy were already broadcasting the truth, showing her people's story, showing his sacrifice. The Trade Authority was silent for the first time in history, because no empire can erase what has already been seen. And as Lyra walked out of the burning tower, leaving behind the man who changed her fate, the city paused, watching a single alien woman step into the light, free at last, carrying the truth of humanity with her. The sun rose slowly over the skyline of Virel, painting the metal towers gold. Smoke curled from the ruins of the relay tower, but through that smoke came light, bright and alive. Screens across the city flickered, then changed, showing faces, voices, and memories that had been buried for decades. The truth was no longer silent. The story of Nerith was everywhere. In the markets where once she had stood behind glass, people stopped in disbelief. The same cold aisles that once displayed silence were now filled with murmurs. Every screen replayed a single sentence spoken by Lyra's voice. "We were sold as products, but we were born as people." And beside her, a still image of Reed standing in front of the relay tower, his face lit by fire, his eyes steady. Lyra walked alone through the empty street wearing his jacket, the same one he had wrapped around her that first night. Its torn fabric smelled of smoke and oil, but to her it smelled like freedom. Her steps were slow, her body weak, but her purpose clear. She carried in her hand the small metal tag that once hung from her wrist, the same one that said Product 7843, its barcode now scorched. Unreadable. The city that once ignored suffering now stood frozen. Humans, aliens, machines, all watching the broadcast that no authority could stop. Across every world connected to the network, the data spread like wildfire, treaties, files, secret footage. Everything Reed and Lyra had uncovered was now public. Every citizen saw what the Trade Authority had done, In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, chaos broke out. Senators shouted, leaders demanded answers. Others lowered their heads in shame for the first time in centuries. The powerful were afraid of the truth because the truth had a face, a voice, and a human who gave his life to make it heard. Lyra reached the old bridge above the market, the same bridge where she and Reed had first crossed the city under the red sky. She stood there silently, looking down at the crowd below. People gathered, whispering her name. Some even bowed. Others simply watched in awe. Not because she was alien, but because she was free. She took a deep breath, her voice calm but strong. His name was Reed, she said aloud, her words echoing through the market speakers that still worked. He was human. He bought me, but not to own me. He bought me to set me free. Her voice trembled, but she continued. And now, because of him, none of us will ever be property again. The crowd was silent for a long moment, and then applause began. Slow at first, then rising like thunder. The sound carried through the streets, through the towers, through the ruins. Even the drones that once served the trade stood motionless, unsure of what to do for the first time. The machines hesitated, and the people didn't. Far away on other worlds, the same reaction grew. Miners stopped working, factory lights dimmed. Soldiers laid down their weapons. The universe had seen what compassion looked like, not as a speech, but as an act. Lyra turned her gaze toward the horizon, the morning sun reflecting in her eyes. She whispered softly, "You did it, Reed. They know now." Her hand tightened around his old wristband, the only thing she had left of him. The screen on it was cracked, but faintly. It still glowed, showing a last message he had recorded before the tower collapsed. His voice played quietly, rough but steady. "If you're hearing this, it means you made it. Tell them what we saw, tell them who we are. Tell them that being human isn't about where we're born, but what we choose to do when no one else will." Lyra closed her eyes, letting his words sink into her heart. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from pride. She looked at the metal tag in her hand one last time, then held it up toward the rising sun. The light caught it and flashed across the city, a small, simple sign of victory. Later that day, the Trade Authority collapsed, their systems overwhelmed, their leaders arrested or in hiding. The Galactic Council announced new laws banning biological trade across all known worlds, and in the center of the council plaza, they raised a monument not for soldiers or rulers, but for a single engineer from Earth who broke the silence with kindness. The statue showed a human standing beside an alien woman, their hands touching, both looking toward the stars. At its base were the words Reed had once spoken, carved in every language known: "Freedom isn't given, it's chosen." Years passed, but his story never faded. Schools taught it, children whispered it before sleep. Artists painted it across walls, and on the anniversary of the broadcast, lights glowed across 100 planets, not to mourn but to remember. Lyra returned to her homeworld of Nareth. Where green seas met silver sand, she stood by the shore, feeling the wind for the first time in years. Around her, others of her kind walked freely again, rebuilding their cities, teaching their language, and writing new songs about a human who came from far away and changed everything. She knelt on the sand and placed Reed's tag there, pressing it gently into the ground. "You gave your life so that mine could mean something," she whispered, her eyes shining, and now it does. As she stood, the sky above shimmered, ships passing freely between worlds without chains. Without fear, she smiled softly, her reflection in the waves calm and bright, because freedom had finally come, not through armies, not through power, but through one man's simple act of courage in a supermarket full of silence, and somewhere in the endless light of the stars she hoped he could see it, because the galaxy he died to save was now alive, awake, and free.